To make of that mess at the Wyatt Detention Center.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
You know, we got enough going on when it comes to the contentiousness of the entire immigration conversation in this country without having, you know, a bonus controversy, the likes of which we have at the Wyatt Detention Center from last week when a gentleman, correctional officer, either out of frustration, slipped on the pedal, or whatever, kind of bumped his car into some folks trying to get into work, understandably upset at the idea that his access egress was blocked. Here's the headline that we all saw right off the bat. You've probably seen the video. The Attorney General has been on this case since. You've seen the original coverage. Some of that's included in our next story, but here's the headline for that. Interesting, you know, the Attorney General actually calls a press conference not with a final adjudication or charge, but with a, hey, I'm still looking for some information and help, and kind of touch and base. And the first reaction that you have is, well, spit it up. You know, what do you got? And then all of a sudden you have to check yourself and say, oh, wait a second. This is what a properly elected, competent law enforcement officer will do from time to time, kind of keep us updated as to the status of where he is, what he's thinking, and what we may look forward to next time. It's just that we haven't been very well conditioned to that around here in quite some time. So I actually I was all revved up yesterday on the radio thinking, what the heck is the matter with Neronha? He calls a press conference, he's got nothing. I listen to him and think, oh, he's reaching out. Not so bad. Here was the coverage.
I think it is a mistake for a prosecutor to leap to conclusions before they have everything.
It's been nearly a week since Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Neronha launched a joint criminal investigation into this incident, now gaining national attention. This truck driving toward protesters blocking an employee parking lot at the Wyatt. Those protesters demanding the facility release immigration detainees housed there. Neronha said so far they've interviewed 31 witnesses and still have to interview at least 20 more.
There are two things here that we're evaluating. One is the operation of the vehicle itself. The second is the deployment of what is commonly known as pepper spray.
He stressed the importance of speaking to each witness on scene, asking anyone with information or video of the incident to contact them.
I'll be frank, there have been some conflicting reports as to the extent of the injuries, and the extent of the injuries is important to whatever decisions we make going forward.
Central Falls and state police are also involved in this investigation. AG Neronha estimates it will take several more weeks of gathering evidence before any conclusions are made.
Well, unlike your role as a federal prosecutor, where we all kind of went, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, and then you call something and we finally get something. That's typical. That's A, looking for some more info, and keeping in touch.
Yeah.
I had to check myself over all of that.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's
Thank you.
No, you're welcome, Dan. I mean, you know, I think it's unusual. You know, I said it yesterday. It's not something we typically do. I think really two things were driving me there. Number one is, this is an incident that was tumultuous, a lot of interest, frankly, a lot of chatter out there. We were getting it at the office. We get lots of calls. I think that first morning we had 30 phone calls from members of the public. You know, are you on this? What are you doing? Lots of reports about scope of injuries. Frankly, a lot of information we still need to gather. So I thought it was important to really do two things. One was to let the public know that we're actively engaged in this, why we are moving with deliberation for lots of reasons. We talked about them yesterday. And also to give the public an opportunity, if they have information about this, to reach out to us and do that. Now, I think it's unusual, but this case is unusual. A lot going on, lots of acts that need to be evaluated, lots of potential witnesses, simply given how many people are out there. And I wanted people to know we've been on it, we remain on it. This is what the timeline is. If you've got information, we want to hear from you.
So I can already hear the wheels turning in the viewer's mind right now. And I say this respectfully. What, are you blind?
Yeah. Sure.
Do I need to show you the video again?
Sure. Yeah.
So what is all of this?
Yeah, so-
what is all of this
Sure.
other stuff?
Yeah, so there are two principal acts that need to be evaluated. One is the operation of the vehicle, and one is the deployment of the pepper spray. And so we haven't reached any conclusions about that yet. But let me address your question, because I think I know what it is. It's like, well, you saw the video. What more do you need, right?
There you
sure.
go. Right.
There's the practical question. Here's the practical answer. I'm not talking about this case because I'm not ready to talk about that yet. But let's talk about a case generally. As soon as a prosecutor makes a charge, brings a charge, I have to be ready to turn over discovery right away. To turn it over, I've got to have it. That means whatever piece of video that's out there, I've got to turn it over. Any witness statement that I would take, I've got to turn it over. So if I don't have it all yet, if I'm not ready to turn it over, if I've interviewed 30 witnesses and I got 20 more that I got to interview, I got to have it all ready to turn over the instant I pull the trigger in any case that I do. So you've got to be ready from a discovery perspective if you ever reach the point of charging in any case. Here's the other thing. I don't ever want to be surprised by a piece of evidence I haven't seen. I've tried enough cases to know that the document I haven't seen, the video I haven't seen, the witness I haven't interviewed, who emerges later is not good for what I'm trying to do. So there's no reason, in my judgment, to go any faster than we need to. I don't believe that this individual going forward at the moment is a threat to public safety, okay, the person who operated the vehicle. So he's not in this context at the moment. There's not a public safety reason to jump to an arrest. So let's do this the right way.
So is this going to be more of a modus operandi for you? It's hard to hypothesize about cases in the future and like just kind of brainstorm and daydream about what may come up. But I'm sure tomorrow, next day, 3 months from now, a year from now, there'll be another case or two where something is apparent,
Sure.
but
So-
not necessarily convincing, and you're going to do a little bit more of this halfway through or 1/3 through or whatever.
I don't know how often, but-
discovery help me effort.
Sure, look, I want to be as transparent as I can. I want to be informative as I can. At the same time, I recognize that you can't put information out there that's substantive until the cake is ready to go. I always go back to my DOJ principles, and if you look at the principles of when we speak to the media, generally we don't until we're ready. And we don't if we never charge for obvious reasons. But there are exceptions. So when public confidence in what the office is doing, or there's a public safety risk, you can imagine something is blown up. We don't have anybody in custody, but we've got to let the public know that we're on it, that the threat is either continues to exist or doesn't. We can speak in that instance. And there are instances, I think, when you've got to let the public know that you're on it. And there was enough, I believe, there was enough chatter out there coming into the office and elsewhere. There's a lot of fog around this, and we needed just to let the public know that we're on it. Here's why we're taking the approach we're taking. We'll be back when we have more to share. But I thought it was important. Do I think this is going to be a common thing? I don't think so. I don't think it's the preferable way to go in the typical case, but there's a lot about this which is atypical.
Fog or heat?
No, I would call it fog. I would call it fog, and I'll tell you why. I mean, if you just look, so when I first learned about this, I'm looking at it through the media like everybody else. I see one video, and I see another video. Those two videos tell me something very different about what occurred that night. One tells me more than the other one did.
Which one says what about what?
Well, so video of the driver. So I think it might have been Steve Alquist's video, and then I saw a video from another vantage point.
Steve runs a blog. What's it called? Uprise RI. Good one.
Right. So the first question is, look, is this a matter that we need to get involved in? Right. So it's developing. I'm kind of seeing this in real time as I'm seeing it, the way most people get their news today. And so my point is that until you see everything, different things will tell you different things. And again, the deployment of the pepper spray here, I think, is something we have to evaluate. I know we have to evaluate it. And that's also a complicated situation. So again, I come back to, let's get it right. There was no reason not to get it right in the first instance.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, there are two potentially chargeable issues here. Whatever the actual assault battery with a vehicle neighborhood charge is, the pepper spray use by the correctional officers as they were trying to clear out those protesters. Those are two things that you're evaluating. What you've been on the record, though, about is that you don't really see any meat on the bone in charging the protesters.
Yeah, look, I think, so let's go back and talk about protesting. So you have the right in this country to protest
Why don't you
peacefully.
hold your thought, because I see the clock, and I want you to have ample time to discuss this. So when we come back, we'll talk about the protester part when we return. Stay with us. So there is the, protester perspective on this whole Wyatt detention situation, but of course it's not about the Wyatt Detention Center exclusively. It's about the entire immigration policy. It's about the movement of folks who are nabbed at the border up to Rhode Island. Remember, Wyatt is a private facility. It's not a state-owned facility. It's not a federally owned facility. It's leased and does business, and it has its own financial problems with the city of Central Falls. And I mean, it's a real frittata in and of itself. How the customers, the prisoners, which way do you want to discuss it, right, are treated and handled is part of the whole concern. There are agendas in this whole thing. And here's some of the reaction to the reaction that news covered.
The Wyatt Detention Center is a creature of state statute. It exists as a legal entity through state law.
Former State Representative Aaron Regenberg says for these reasons, he believes it's possible new legislation can shut down the Wyatt Detention Center
To ban the operation of private prisons in Rhode Island.
He and other immigration advocates joined forces at the State House Tuesday morning, hoping to get the attention of Governor Raimondo and state lawmakers. I reached out to the governor's office. The governor's press secretary sent me a statement calling President Trump's immigration policies, quote, immoral, and that reform in Washington is needed so there can be a path forward for anyone who comes to this country seeking a better life. As for what the detention center has to say about this call for action, today I was referred to a July news release from the center, which says the Wyatt is, quote, a nonprofit quasi-public facility and is not a for-profit private prison. The center also maintains its primary mission is to securely and humanely house detainees sent to the facility by referring partner agencies, including ICE.
So there's a little flavor about the protesters themselves. So let's go back to the question that we left at the break, and that is your whole, I guess, philosophy and read on protest and how that pertains to the idea that you're not seeing any criminality in the way those people were lining up outside the Wyatt.
Right. So look, we have a fundamental right in this country to protest, peacefully protest. Now, when you present a public safety threat, you blocked 95 post-Ferguson a few years ago, right?
Awful.
Right. You are at that point subject to arrest. At the same time, as you're being arrested, police can use excessive force. They got to use the force reasonable to effectuate what it is they're trying to do. So if we look at that night that we're talking about, before the vehicle ever arrives there, it's from what I've seen. And again, we're not done yet. There are individuals blocking an egress or an access, right? So you've got that. In theory, could those people be arrested at that point? I guess presumably. But once the situation devolves, it's pretty clear to me that I've got to use my discretion to focus on what I consider to be the most concerning incidents there. One is the operation of the vehicle. The second is the deployment of the pepper spray. And look, that's part of what a prosecutor does. When they're evaluating a case, is apply our discretion, try to come to what we believe is the right result. You try to bring to bear your experience, and that's what we're trying to do here.
I'm guessing this has some pressure. Look, whatever's happened with the vehicle is whatever you decide to charge, assumptive question, I think will speak for itself on the vehicle. The pepper spray is kind of interesting. I'm sure you got to work hard on that one, because every time you make a decision on a case like this, you're setting a kind of a precedent for a charge. And so now, the correctional officers or police officers or state troopers now hesitate to use pepper spray when they're in a contention. All that kind of stuff, I'm sure, is your factor, right? Or factors.
So speaking, John, I want to talk about this case generally, but you can't be a Monday morning quarterback either. So you always try to evaluate conduct in the context of what is reasonable. Right? What is reasonable? And certainly in some instances, deployment of pepper spray is reasonable. In some instances, it's not. And so that's why you have to have a wholesome understanding of the facts before you can draw those conclusions. And that's why it does not make sense to me to do this piecemeal or to do it too quickly. Let's get it right. Let's talk to everybody who is impacted. Let's understand the full scope of any injuries that occurred. Because, why is that relevant? Because if there are any charges, sometimes those charges turn on the significance or the extent of the injuries. So until you have that clear picture, you don't even know which charge to bring if you're going to bring any. So there's absolutely no reason for you to do anything on a fast pace here.
Well, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable approach to me. And if I didn't, if you and I have battled on some things, but I think what's really interesting about this, and I think I've learned this over time, and it was kind of confirmed with the telephone chatter to the radio show after this incident occurred, and that is how you feel about the fundamental base issue, meaning the immigration stuff, and how the transport of these people to the Wyatt has occurred, and where you stand philosophically on the issue. Let's forget about the protest and the car itself, or the truck. creates a prism for you to actually make a judgment about whether those people should have been blocking the entrance, whether this guy's frustration is legitimate enough. It's a fascinating human condition. You've got to eliminate that.
Of course, yeah, that is completely separate from what we're doing.
Right.
This is a criminal investigation into whether this conduct rises to the level of criminal activity. Haven't drawn any conclusions yet. I have to divorce myself from the Trump immigration policy. We've brought
Which
suit.
you and I have talked about, and you have qualms over.
Right, we brought actions with other AGs against it.
Yes.
Public charge and lots of other things we could talk about some other time. But I have to divorce myself from any of that. I need to analyze the conduct that's in front of me with the assistance of the state police in Central Falls, and that's what we're going to do.
Do you find that as more immigration turmoil continues here, and whatever role the state will have to play either intra Rhode Island or inter with other states, do you feel like this case is a little bit of an annoyance to your clear articulation of points of view on the bigger picture? Do you feel like you have to get this thing kind of tucked away so that
Not really.
will you hesitate to talk about the bigger issues of immigration?
No, not really. No, I can compartmentalize those two things. What's unfortunate here is that this incident happened at all. You've got people out there protesting. Sure, in theory, I don't know all the facts, but in theory they blocked an access point that was trying to be used. It could have been arrested for that. It devolved, right? It could have been done, I think, just going up to 50,000 feet for a minute. It could have been, all of this could have been avoided if different decisions had been made along the way. What we've got to sort out is what's the impact of those decisions as they were made, and that's what we're endeavoring to do.
Projected timetable?
Oh, a few weeks. It's not months.
Okay.
You know, no more than a month, I would think. We are literally moving as fast as we possibly can. I've had my people on it full time since it started.
All right, good. That's a great answer. So when we come back, the Attorney General actually does other stuff. Next. All right, so you got to meet the United States Attorney General doing some work in Washington. What's on the plate?
Yeah, so I'm on a committee of AGs, bipartisan AGs around the country that interfaces with the U.S. Department of Justice, probably because of my background. So we were in Washington meeting with Attorney General Barr on Monday, just a one-day trip, about human trafficking and elder abuse. Two issues are priority for him and issues are priority for us. Our priorities don't always align, frankly, but on these they do. We can do a lot more work in human trafficking. We were doing a lot of good work there when I was U.S. Attorney, and some of that work has fallen off. I think in large part because Backpage is no longer posting children, directly or indirectly online for commercial sex purposes. Backpage has been taken out of that game.
Remember to explain to everybody what Backpage is.
Yeah, so Backpage was a place where people trafficking children for commercial sex purposes would post online. Now they've been taken down by some criminal and civil lawsuits and criminal activity against them, criminal enforcement activity against them. That's great, big picture. Small picture, that's how we got leads. We knew where children were being trafficked because we could answer through an agent and add on Backpage and follow up, go to the hotel, rescue the child and bring a lawsuit and bring a criminal case. So our case numbers were in the high 20s when I was still U.S. Attorney. They've really come off because now it's even further underground. So Attorney General Barr and Attorney Generals from the states agreed that we've got to marshal our resources to root out where this is happening. We know it's still ongoing. The fact that our case is down doesn't mean human trafficking has gone away, that children aren't being exploited commercially for sex. So we've got to find those leads and take action. So good work to do there. Elder abuse scams are rampant among seniors, elders, and so we've got to do more work there together. There's opportunity there. My point to the Attorney General was, if you don't include U.S. attorneys in this mission, then we're not going to get this done well. Aaron Weissman and I, the new U.S. Attorney, have a great relationship. But if the mothership at DOJ tries to work with local AGs without the U.S. attorneys in the mix, we won't be very successful.
I don't know how they could. Yet Washington, as you call it, the mothership, its team are the U.S. attorneys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a mistake that happens in Washington. They are very Washington-centric. You know, the mothership is big, and so sometimes they forget that the people in the field are U.S. attorneys. I experienced some of that.
Do they not include them because they don't want to put work on them?
No, they don't include them because they don't think of them. And so I raised it a couple of times, having been the U.S. attorney.
Having been that.
Yeah, so look, I know that the AG is not going to reach out to the FBI or HSI or ATF directly, because if I do that, they're going to reach out to the U.S. attorney and say, hey, look, can I answer the call, frankly. So if the U.S. attorney isn't built into this, whether it's violent crime work, whether it's human trafficking or elder abuse, if we're going to work together, big Department of Justice and AGs locally, we've got to have the U.S. attorneys in the mix.
Because you want to work with the local U.S. attorney.
Of course.
You don't want to have to wait for answers or cooperation or investigative help from Washington.
Yeah, Maine Justice in Washington can give you resources. They can, give you places to go and handouts and that kind of thing. But if you want to do cases on the ground, and you're doing it in a task force environment, you got to have the U.S. attorney.
Did he hear you?
He did. Yeah, he did.
Did he concede?
He agreed. Yeah, he knows. I mean, he's been around the block, a bit, and and we talked about that. So next time we meet, we're going to meet quarterly with the AG about these issues and others. And the U.S. attorneys come to Washington. I was on those committees as U.S. attorney. We're going to meet at the same time in Washington. So we're there at the same time. We'll meet Barr at the same time.
Did you feel doing that kind of good work and feeling connected to Bill Barr, who seemingly has this as a priority too, that the drama that surrounds the Trump administration, Trump himself, Mueller, the Russian probe, all the things that most of us, and you and I have talked about some of this, just don't seem to be working the right way. Did you feel a sense of comfort that come to you about the U.S. Attorney General, that at least when he's compartmentalizing or running his own concern, meaning I haven't heard much from the president on human trafficking, right? I mean, you could mention it to him today and he'll talk about it being the most important priority, and the next day he'll forget about it, right? But you know what the question I'm asking is, right? Did you get a sense of, at least this guy is on his game and really serious about stuff that's under the radar, sort of, and the other stuff is...
Yeah, I did. I mean, I don't think we agree on everything, but I think there are some places where...
Did you like him?
How do I put this? He's not the warmest guy I've ever met, but I liked his professionalism and his ability. And I think, for me, that's where it starts. If you're not dealing with somebody who has the capacity to do the job, you're in trouble. What I was comforted by, because we had a meeting before we met with Barr, we were there for almost 6 hours that day, so we met with staffers for a good chunk of that period. What I was impressed by was the level of competence that remains in the department. Look, some places aren't as robust as they used to be. Civil rights is not where it used to be, for example. I think there's an overemphasis on certain areas. So I think the federal government uniquely suited to do national security, cyber, in some ways public corruption. Violent crime is something the states do very, very well. So it's low-hanging fruit for the feds to say they're going to do violent crime, but the practical reality is the significant violent crime in Rhode Island we're going to be doing. They can assist with us. We need their help on cyber, focus there. We need their help there on human trafficking, because they can get into some of these platforms, these social media platforms. So let's maximize our respective resources. So I don't necessarily agree with some of the priorities he has writ large, but I was impressed with the competence in the department that remains and in his apparent willingness to focus on the things we can do together. And that was refreshing.
And I think to the viewers and to me, reassuring.
I think so, yeah, exactly.
All right, listen, thank you for your continuing conversation and checking in. We'll figure out how you figure this mess out with Wyatt in a few weeks and invite you back.
Thanks, Dan.
Enjoy the rest of the summer.
See you.
Final word when we come back. All right, so we have some downtime for Dan York State of Mind over the next week and a half, just some in-house organizational stuff. You'll see some programs from the recent past over the next week and a half, and our next original show is planned for Thursday of the following week after Labor Day. So enjoy the balance of this summer. Tempest fugit. What are you going to do? It'll stay warm till October. Take care. Good night.